Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Today, Donald Trump's so-called border czar announced the administration will be concluding its operations in Minnesota.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. There will be some security teams staying here, the QRFs, until we're assured that those agitators' incidents either stay low or further decline. I'm not going to remove everybody out of the safety of our officers, but like I said, and Operation Metro Surge is ending.
Now, people on the ground in Minneapolis, St. Paul, across the state, observers across the country are understandably pretty apprehensive about declaring any kind of victory because we have heard rhetoric like this from the Trump administration, including from Tom Homan a few weeks ago. So right now we have to wait and see what they actually do. There are still today reports, anecdotal, of ICE activity throughout the city. That said, this is a different kind of tone and does seem to be some genuine change in policy, like what happened in, say, Chicago, where they had Operation Midway Blitz, and then they drew people out. It very much looks like the Trump administration is actually taking a different posture now. They may have finally realized that their occupation of an American state and cities is a failure. Because clearly they thought they were going to storm into Minneapolis and crack some skulls and undertake an explicitly racist project to harass and slander and terrorize the non-white citizens of the Twin Cities, particularly Somali Americans, and be rewarded for it politically. Instead, everyone there hated it. It has been overwhelmingly unpopular across the ideological spectrum in an incredibly diverse city. People stood shoulder to shoulder with their neighbors. They went into this incredible mode of civic resistance, unlike anything I have ever seen up close. They organized food drops for folks who were scared to go to the grocery store. They drove their friends and neighbors afraid to take public transportation, sometimes laying low in the backseat of a car so they couldn't be spotted by ICE. They organized school patrols at basically every school and daycare in the entire metro area. In 5 degrees below zero, they patrolled the schools every morning, every day at pickup, to make sure that kids and parents or teachers were not just snatched away at the bus stop or when they were dropping their kids off. Regular people built this entire infrastructure out of nowhere from scratch to stand up and defend their neighbors. Organic, homegrown mutual aid just to look out for one another. It's something we saw firsthand when we reported from Minneapolis 2 weeks ago. People refused to buckle even after that organized resistance cost 2 people their lives in the span of a month. All these folks that were doing all this, the school patrols, driving around, monitoring ICE, they saw Renee Good and Alex Preddy killed by their own government in broad daylight and zero repercussions for the men that killed them. And you know what they kept doing? They kept resisting anyway. They wouldn't give up and they would not give in. They would not allow Donald Trump and Stephen Miller's vision for this country to prevail. So now today, it looks like they may have beaten back those forces, at least for now. But again, the cost of this occupation will be nearly impossible to calculate. Not just for those 2 people that lost their lives, or the others who were shot, or in car accidents that were caused by ICE, or taken, but the many folks who have, for instance, foregone medical care. There are people in the Twin Cities area with chronic conditions, pregnant women who stayed home, didn't go to their prenatal checkups because they were scared they would be taken. People like Aliyah Rahman, a disabled U.S. citizen who, remember, was detained on her way to a doctor's appointment to treat her traumatic brain injury and was grabbed out of her car after they broke her windows. Parents kept kids home from school. We heard it from teacher after teacher there, amid stories of ICE raids at bus stops and on school grounds. There are now concerns that some Minnesota schools may lose funding due to that drop in attendance because attendance is the metric by which state funding is calculated, federal funding as well. And that's to say nothing of all the actual missed classes. And how can you even begin to calculate the cost of the collective trauma forced on this community? The trauma of children like Liam Ramos, the 5-year-old who's never going to forget being used as bait by ICE agents to drag his dad out of the house before being detained and shipped down to Texas. That kind of cruelty lingers. But, crucially, that cruelty did not win. Here's the thing. This administration made a bet, and they keep making it, that most Americans, the majority of us, are as bigoted as Stephen Miller. And they're wrong. Time and time again, American people have stood up and said, no, no way. And not just in Minnesota, but all across the country. Like when they mistakenly shipped Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a foreign black box gulag in El Salvador, and they told us he was never getting out. Absolutely not. But thanks to enormous public pressure and outcry, and including Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland visiting him, he was returned to the United States. You know, the government tried to charge him with a crime and is still trying to deport him, but you know what? For now, he continues to be with his family because there are people fighting back. And there are tons of cases like this where the administration detained people they shouldn't have, and then they got caught, and then it went public, and then they had to backtrack. Last year, for instance, we brought you the story of Narciso Barranco. He's the father of 3 U.S. Marines. You see him there on the ground, who was brutally detained, punched, wrestled to the ground while doing landscaping work outside of a California IHOP. The government tried to argue he was a danger because, ready for this, he was holding his weed whacker. Local news covered it, local reporters, nationally, the public was outraged. Guess what? Today, an immigration judge dismissed his deportation case. Public pressure also secured the release of pro-Palestinian activists Ramaza Ozturk and Mahmoud Khalil, who were unconstitutionally detained by this administration over their obviously protected free speech. In fact, this week, another immigration court said Ozturk cannot be deported, according to her lawyer. While Khalil was back on Capitol Hill this week lobbying on behalf of other targets of this administration, while his own deportation case makes its way through the courts. Again, nothing is over here. I don't think anyone is deluded enough to think it is, right? But the lesson is that they can be beaten. The administration can be beaten. And the reason, crucially, they can be beaten is this. Ordinary people living in this country from different backgrounds and ethnicities and races and religions and worldviews just don't like it. And they have been standing up. And I don't think all the people who are working to oppose the Trump vision of blood and soil nation based on ethnic purity, I don't think all of them have the same views on public policy or they all agree on everything, but they do fundamentally share a sense of neighborliness and decency. And it turns out that's a pretty powerful force. Tonight, I'm reminded of a man I spoke to, a pastor, in fact, who was protesting outside an ICE facility in Minnesota.
We're going to outlast them. We're not going to get tired. They're going to get tired and they're going to leave. And the country's going to get tired of ICE, of using people like this. There's a saying around here, when does the ice go out? It's when does the ice melt off the lakes?
Yeah.
It's called Ice Out Day. You know, people will park old cars on a lake, or they used to,
yeah,
and make bets on when the car would sink. We know how to wait till ice out. And people around here, we're gonna outlast ICE, and we're going to be here when ICE is out.
We are in a ferocious, ongoing, day-by-day political battle for what kind of country we want to be. But the people with the better, more humane vision have the numbers on their side.